Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the opening night of the Worlds of Imagination, Media, Place, and Tourism in today's global world. It's kind of different than we have all imagined, of course. During the COVID-19 pandemic, this is our new reality from now on, or at least now. So welcome from the comfort of your own home. Hopefully, you got a nice cup of tea, a nice glass of wine, some snacks, anything that you prefer. You can grab it now from the refrigerator, but make sure that you stand still, stay still, and watch the entire evening because we got a nice program worked out for you. The program has speakers, a Q&A, and a screening of the documentary produced by Emiel Martins, Welcome to the Smiling Coast. But let me not get ahead of myself. Let's start with introducing the speakers and just give a little glimpse of today's program. The first speaker that we will have will be Stijn Reinders. He is the principal investigator of the Worlds of Imagination research project. Followed by his speech, we will have a speech given by Saskia Kachel. She is Rotterdam Film Commissioner. After that, we will have a Q&A with the members of the Worlds of Imagination research team. I will give their names and I will read them out loud so that I'll pronounce them correctly. Bear with me. Deborah Povoa, Apoorva Nanjangood, Henry Chow, and Rosa Schiavone. Unfortunately, Rosa Schiavone can't be here physically tonight, but during the Q&A, Stijn Reinders and Emiel Martins will join in to answer the questions. And as I said, to close the evening, we will have a screening of the documentary Welcome to the Smiling Coast, produced by Emiel Martins. Now, I came on stage and I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Audelia. People know me as Fem. Before the COVID pandemic, I was a DJ, a host. I presented many evenings like this. Anything that I can do basically during the COVID lockdown. So I decided to start a new project, a new business, and that is a driving school. During lockdown, I can't start with that either, so I'm in great luck during this pandemic. But enough about me. Without further ado, I will introduce the first speaker of tonight. He is a professor of cultural heritage here at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam, the leader of 2 international research projects, Locating Imagination and Worlds of Imagination. Other than that, he is the Vice Dean of Research at the Erasmus School of History, Culture and Communication, a member of the Supervisory Board, and he recently co-founded a master program based on tourism, culture, and society. And this is just a small glimpse of all the things he does. If I had to mention everything he does, we would be here until 9:30, the end of the program. So I'll just give him the stage to let him introduce himself and let him tell him a little bit more about what he does. Please give a warm welcome to Stijn Reinders.
Thanks, Fem, for that wonderful introduction. You make me feel proud. Very great. And for all the others, welcome everyone. It's really great to see so many of you here today. And what also makes me really happy is the fact that our conference tonight and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow has brought together scholars from so many different parts of the world, as well as different disciplines. Now, this diverse group of academics shares one common interest. We are all fascinated by the relation between media and tourism. In 2005, Crouch, Jackson and Thompson noted that there are multiple connections between media culture and tourism practices. Since then, this relation between the media and tourism sector has only intensified, reaching a point of almost full convergence in the year 2021. On the one hand, popular culture has become the window to our world, maybe even more so in these times of corona. And by watching movies, television, by reading books, by playing video games, we get to know other places, other nations, laying the seeds for future journeys. On the other hand, the the media have become an integral part of contemporary tourism practices. Whether it concerns planning your itinerary, booking your next holiday, with all these kind of activities that you are doing, maybe even reporting or sort of sharing your experiences online on Instagram, the media are always there. And what I personally find most interesting is the fact that the media itself has become one of the most important tourist destinations. Increasingly, people want to visit the fictional worlds they know from popular culture, whether it's Dubrovnik, associated with Game of Thrones, or dating a little bit further back, New Zealand, associated with other very important cinemas. Now, in the hope, maybe people want to get closer to a beloved character, or who knows, maybe they want to catch a little bit of that magic that surrounds these great stories. Now, in all these processes, imagination is key. Our imagination is stirred by images, sounds, and narratives from the media. We use that imagination to make sense of the world around us and locate ourselves in time and place. Indeed, as some scholars have argued, we are not Homo sapiens, the thinking man, but we are Homo narrans, a creature that likes to tell stories and that likes to listen to stories, using those stories to imagine a world out there, to construct notions of identity, self-identity, and to foster a sense of belonging. Now, in that same imagination drives us away to faraway places, in search of something we want to know, something we want to explore, or maybe also something that we identify with. Now, research on this convergence between media and tourism has boomed enormously. Great work has been done in this direction in the last years, including that from scholars who will be giving their presentations tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. But we need to acknowledge that there is still a lot more to learn. One of those lacunas concerns the fact that most of our knowledge is mainly based on examples from Western countries. Now, why is that a problem? Why not just focus on the West? Well, that's because in the last 10 years, the media and the tourism industries have gone through major transformations. First, we can detect a strong growth of non-Western film industries, like Bollywood in India, Nollywood in Nigeria, each producing more movies annually than Hollywood, and each catering to a larger worldwide audience. Second, it's clear that the face of tourism has been transformed dramatically as well. The global tourist flows are increasingly based on people from outside the West. So, for example, while Americans used to make up the biggest part of intercontinental travel, and for decades, ever since the 1950s, this role has been taken in by Chinese tourists since 2016. Now, if you consider these two developments together, it's clear that we have to look beyond Hollywood if we want to have a comprehensive understanding of the relation between media and tourism. And our current conference aims to do exactly that, moving beyond an exclusively Western scope by focusing on media and tourism in diverse cultures from around the world. Of course, this also includes examples from Europe and America and Australia, but emphatically put in a transcultural and also transmedial comparative context. In that sense, this conference could not have taken place 10 or 20 years ago. And the themes that draw our attention tonight and in the following days are very topical and close to the heartbeat of our times. So what is on offer? This conference boasts more than 50 presentations selected after a competitive review process. In addition, we have 5 highly renowned keynote speakers, Mimi Scheller, Dal-Yon Yin, Matt Hills, Sean Kem, and Lucia Naguib. Furthermore, there are 2 special sessions. One session bringing together film commissioners from different parts of the world, and one session zooming in on the nexus between the media and tourism industries in Spain. In sum, there is much to learn, but also to enjoy and to engage with during this conference. As a Homo narrans, your primal need for good and meaningful stories will be met. That's a promise. But before we do so, before we start, I would like to thank the organizations who made this conference possible, in particular the European Research Council, our main sponsor. We are very grateful for their financial support. They not only funded this conference, but also the larger research project Worlds of Imagination that culminated in this conference. I would also like to thank my team members of the wonderful research they've been doing in the last years and all the efforts that they've put in organizing this conference. So thanks to Deborah Povoa, Emil Martens, Apoorva Nanjangut, Rosa Schiavone, Henry Chow and Sarah Haverkamp. And thanks as well to Studium Generale for co-hosting this night. Now for now, my time is up. I wish you all a very fruitful conference and of course a great opening night. And I hope to meet you all in person during one of our sessions tomorrow or the day after tomorrow.
Thank you for those wonderful words, Stijn. So I think it will be kind of unnatural, or will feel kind of unnatural, but anytime that a speaker comes on the stage or leaves the stage, just give them an applause, even if you're in your living room, even if you're in your study room, even if you're in your backyard, wherever you are, just give them a round of applause so they will feel the warmth and the love coming through the cameras. Let's try with the next speaker. We're moving on to the person who has been the Rotterdam Film Commissioner for over 10 years. Before that, the Rotterdam Film Commissioner role was just a service desk. However, she has committed to strengthening the film media sector in Rotterdam. So that means anytime you want to go to Rotterdam to screen or record anything, which is a movie, a documentary, a clip, whatever you can imagine that you can be filming, you can address the Rotterdam Film Commissioner, because she will help you with permits, parking, the right spots to be, and everything you will need to get the right and exact perfect shots within Rotterdam. Without any further ado, let's try the hand clapping thing while we welcome Saskia Kachel.
Thank you for having me. Let's start with a short video first.
She's a muse. She's a vibe. Welcome to Rotterdam. Celebrate with us. The way it was, the way it is, and the way it will be. Open up to Rotterdam. Make it happen.
Welcome to Rotterdam, the most international city of the Netherlands. It's the second city with the largest port. We have a lot of young people living in Rotterdam from various backgrounds, working, living, and creating together. Let's see if this thing works. No? Help? Yeah, thank you. Working as a film commissioner. That means I help producers finding their way in Rotterdam, permitting locations, searching for cast and crew. My name is Saskia Kerschel, and I'm very honored to be here. I'm honored to be a citizen of Rotterdam, and I would like to wish you a warm welcome in my city. Like most Rotterdammers, I'm going to try it again. Sorry? Thank you. New for me. Like most Rotterdammers, I'm very proud of my city. The skyline, the Maas, the inner city, all of it is photogenic. Rotterdam is a place that changes. It likes to create and it likes to develop. It's an energetic city, with construction noises as the pounding sound of a heartbeat. Rotterdammers are doers. Niet lullen maar poetsen is a Rotterdam saying. It means hardworking, stay focused, stay grounded, and that energy appeals to me. During the Second World War, the inner city was bombed, but it gave an opportunity to create a new city. They took Atlanta as an example, a city in Northern America. Wide roads, high buildings. The Kop van Zuid used to be the home of the Holland-America line, a ship sailed between New York, or the United States and the Netherlands. If you have a look at the Kop van Zuid now, you can see wide roads, skyscrapers, and brownstone, which resembles a lot like a Northern American city, and it's very popular to film. Besides the cinematic city, we have a base of talented people working in the film industry with various film festivals. The famous one is the IFFR, the International Film Festival of Rotterdam, and it brings the world to Rotterdam. There are over 300,000 visitors, over 500 films, which means a lot of people flying in to Rotterdam. It's the largest film festival of the Netherlands. And alongside the festival, there is the Cinemart, where filmmakers get in touch with financiers. The Rotterdam Film and Media Office. Rotterdam is future-orientated, always looking for new opportunities. Therefore, the Rotterdam Film and Media Office was installed. It's the central box office for film and media makers. It consists of a team of specialists, including myself, who have close ties with the International Film Festival Rotterdam and the local broadcaster award-winning Open Rotterdam. And together we strengthen the film and media industry in Rotterdam by combining our network. Last year was a difficult period for us. Suddenly the city slowed down and felt still. Luckily, we have a resilient film and media industry. During the lockdown, it was still possible to shoot in Rotterdam. The industry made a COVID film protocol, a guideline to work safely. To show the resilience of the city and to give a big thank you for all the people filming and producing in Rotterdam, we have created a showreel, which includes images of productions filmed in Rotterdam. And I'm very proud to present the video made in Rotterdam. One year ahead since COVID, it's time to look forward. When I started with the video Rotterdam for Real, it gave you a small peek into the Eurovision Song Contest 2021, named Open Up. Rotterdam is hosting the 65th Eurovision Song Contest this year, from 18 till 22 May. It's a huge media event. It has an international audience based in over 40 countries with approximately 200 million viewers. A wonderful opportunity to show Rotterdam on their best. Thanks for having me. Enjoy the conference, and if you have any further questions regarding filming or media in Rotterdam, have a look at our website. My contact information is on the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Saskia. Before coming here, before tonight, I watched the clips that y'all just watched through Saskia, her speech, and I thought I knew Rotterdam, but thanks to the film commissioner, now I can say I really know Rotterdam. Now I know the nice spots in the city, and now I know where to go if ever I will have the intention of making a film in or about Rotterdam. We will move on to the Q&A session with the Worlds of Imagination research team. Before we do that, we will have a minute of a technical break. I will be right back. Thank you. Welcome back. It's time for the Q&A session. I would like to do the applause thing again. You know, we practiced before. So I'm going to mention everybody's name and just keep the applause going. We will feel it. We will feel it. So, Stijn Reinders. Deborah Povoa. Henry Chow. Aporva Nanjangut. And Emil Martens. First, we will watch a clip, and after that, we will get the Q&A session started. The first clip will be about film and film tourism experience. Enjoy.
의자를 앞쪽으로 갖다 붙여서 앉아봐요. 서울에서 몇 안 되는 경치가 보일걸요? 하늘도 좋고 30-40분 쉬었다 가요. 편하게.
Thank you. Henry, can you please introduce yourself and elaborate about the clip we just saw?
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Henry Chow. I'm a PhD candidate on the project Worlds of Imagination. And my project looks at K-drama, so South Korean television drama and tourism, mostly for tourists that also comes from the region of East Asia and Southeast Asia. So I think the clip that we just saw was also a clip from a K-drama. And I chose this clip hoping to see a little bit of what media scholars have been telling us for a long time, that television also has this educational, instructional element of it, even though most of the time we think of it as entertainment, and it's something we watch in the couch, in the safety of our living room, and not really thinking so much about it. but then there are a lot of elements in television that also tries to tell us to do things a certain way. And in a way, a lot of these dramas also tell us a lot about how to experience a city as a tourist or maybe as a local as well. So hopefully this clip also tries to point something out from this.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the first question for this Q&A is, how does film/TV instruct how we experience a city?
Yeah, so I think that's quite interesting how we can see that. So also, just like what you said, when you see a clip of Rotterdam, you learn about all these different neighborhoods, and you start to think about them, maybe something that wasn't on your mind before. So in this clip as well, we see an example of that. So this clip was shot in a neighborhood of Seoul, the capital of South Korea, called Haebangchon. And it's kind of a city center, a bit run-down neighborhood, but in the 90s. And it's also gone through a wave of redevelopment, and there's a lot of new artist villages and hip cafes and restaurants coming to this area, which is really in the middle of the city, but because it's next to the American military base, and traditionally it's a bit more of a rundown area, like I said, then it didn't get so much attention before. And you see the attention from the media, from the television dramas, but also from visitors, from tourists. It kind of comes in waves upon waves, so it kind of comes around the same time. And I think that's quite an interesting thing to see, how television or films or other media also helps to introduce to a wider audience certain neighborhoods within a big city like Seoul. And we are also, as viewers of television, taught, or at least suggested in a certain way, to experience a city in a certain way.
Does anybody have? Apoorva, thank you.
That reminds me of also an example from my own case study. But why I also was wondering, why do people find that connection, or why do they want to be instructed by, these television and film productions? So through my research, I've understood that film and TV are quite a great window to any particular city, right? Like, consider, for example, iconic locations that are shown, in certain films or TV. We don't want to miss visiting them if, incidentally we are in the location. So it is nothing but, I think, implicitly encouraging us to relate locations to these, narratives which emotionally connect us with these films, like certain films that you grow up watching, or certain films that, like Henry said, you watch in your own comfort space, and then you connect to these locations. Or at times, I also say that you vicariously travel, through these different characters to these different locations. And through my first case study, I also found out that people want to experience that or be in the shoes of these characters by, living these experiences. And I don't know if the word instruct, but they definitely prime us to see or give us a lens or a framework to view a particular city, right? So my first research paper was about, studying roots tourism and, how the Dutch Hindustani diaspora, the Indian diaspora, they view cinema and see it as a, way to reconnect with their roots. And interestingly, my findings also lead me to realize that when they travel to India, it's not in search always of their roots, but also to find similar frames of references that they found through watching, film and television. And then that's how they kind of want to experience those frames. One of my respondents said they would like to visit, these locations instead of a museum. So like when I said a city, it also becomes part of the city heritage in that sense. So that's how I think it plays a lot of role in telling us what to expect from a city.
Okay, thank you for that elaboration. Now I have a question on my own. But can a movie or a series give us a wrong image about a city? So instead of the image that we see and that we would really want to go there, now you're in the city and you're like, oh, this is it. So that the movie or the series romanticize the city and give us another perception. Does anybody has an answer on that question?
Yeah, maybe I can elaborate elaborate a bit on that.
Thank you, Deborah.
This reminds me of the case of the movie City of God, which was filmed in Brazil. And I remember in my field work taking some so-called favela tours. And some tourists were actually frustrated that they went to these neighborhoods expecting adrenaline, expecting even, violent conflict. And when they got there, it was just a neighborhood, and they were a bit frustrated for the image of City of God not corresponding to the reality of those places. So yeah, that is maybe one tiny example of that.
So it is possible to have a wrong image portrayed in films, series, documentaries, and so forth. Does anybody else want to elaborate on this clip?
Well, maybe in the same context as Deborah. There's also, of course, a saying: there's no any publicity is good publicity. So even bad publicity is good publicity. So there's not really that much evidence that if you portray a particular place in a negative way, particularly in fiction films, that people at home think, oh, that's really happening, and that avoids them from visiting the place. Actually, the opposite, yes, I think, happens more often, that although it's maybe a crime narrative or some other kind of narrative that is not really appealing in that fictional world, does entice them to actually visit that place. So that's actually very interesting, and I've also done some interviews with film commissioners in the Caribbean, and one of them also mentioned to me that if you have the film commission in the tourism department, then you get that kind of discussions, because within the tourism department, they want to spread this positive, happy tourist island for you. So they want to avoid or to cut into scripts if that is differently done. But then, yeah, it doesn't really guarantee any kind of response. So that's maybe also something that I wanted to add.
Thank you, Emil. Thank you for this addition. This was the first clip, so the first section of the Q&A. We'll just move into the second clip that is about film tourism and local communities. Enjoy the clip.
It's been nearly 2 decades since this small island bay was made famous by The Beach, a film with a dark plot and a beautiful setting. Since then, a daily flotilla of tourist boats have brought thousands of visitors, all in search of an unspoiled Thai paradise.
This was the second clip. It was really short, and I would like to ask Deborah to introduce herself and to elaborate on that clip.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Deborah Póvoa, and I'm a PhD researcher in the Worlds of Imagination research team. My research is about media tourism in Brazil, specifically looking into how local communities experience either filmmaking or tourism in their own territories, especially looking into communities that have some sort of vulnerability, either socio-economic or environmental. And this clip shows a bit about this. This clip is about Maya Bay in Thailand, which had to be closed in 2018 because of over-tourism. Maya Bay was where the movie The Beach was filmed in 1999, and since then hundreds of tourists have been coming all the time, and what happens is that the coral reef and the seashore, the sea life was almost destroyed, so they had to close it. Initially it would be a 4-month period of closure. But as it turns out, Maya Bay is still closed today. Apparently it's going to be reopened in May this year, but with a lot of restrictions, including limitations in terms of number of tourists who can be at the same time at a beach, how these tourists are going to enter the beach, how far boats have to get from the shore so that the coral reef is maintained. So yeah, this is a very good example of, a bad example of tourism behavior, but an example of how local communities can have a negative effect with film tourism.
Thank you for that elaboration. And for my storyline, you said the beach might open in May this year, but how long was it closed? In '99, or
it was
how
closed.
long after that did they close down the beach?
Yeah, so it started getting tourists in around '99 because of the movie, and it was closed in 2018. So it was almost 10 years of unrestricted tourism visitation.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Maybe also interesting about this scene is that there's this paradox of tourism, right? Because in the movie itself, the main character goes to this island because it's uninhabited and it's a nice, beautiful island. So, but if one tourist goes in like the footsteps of this main character, but then if thousands of tourists goes, and in the end, the thing that you are looking for is actually lost because of your own presence.
Yes.
I think that's the cynical paradox of tourism.
It is, it is. Thank you for that addition, Stein. What challenges can film tourism pose to the local communities? So, except from the environment that has been broken or neglected, or the coral reefs, stuff like that, what other challenges can there be?
Well, I'll start answering. It's about my research team as well. So film tourism is actually a process, right? It has three, let's say, main phases. The first one is the filming in the location. So when filmmakers come to a location, stay there and film a TV series or a movie. Then this movie is released in cinemas, is exhibited on TV. And then there's the aftermath, which is if tourists come or not to the location. And each of these phases pose different challenges to the filming locations. So in the beginning, when filmmakers come, you can think about issues of disruption of the routine of the residents. Sometimes filmmakers have to close streets, have to film in unusual times and make noise in unusual times. So, of course, the routine of people who live in that place might be disrupted in some way. Then when the movie or the TV series, the media production is being shown to audiences, you can think about issues of representation, right? So if that community is actually happy with how they are being represented on screen, and from my field work, it's often the case that they are not, that they at least with the people that I talk to in Brazil, with these local communities, often was the case that what they would see in the screen would reinforce stereotypes about them, and then, of course, they weren't happy about that. And then, well, in the end, if this production is popular, it might attract tourists, and then the question is whether that location then has the structure to receive those tourists, if there are hotels, restaurants, all the equipment, let's say, to support this new flow of people coming in. And interestingly, we can also think about filmmakers themselves as tourists, because one example is my second case study for my research, which is in this very small city in the northeast of Brazil called Cabaceiras. And when I went there for field work, it had just been closed for 7 months for a major TV series. So they literally closed all the hotels for the filmmakers to stay, for the actors to stay, for the crew. And it was 7 months of guaranteed income for that population, but also a major change in their routine and how the city looked like.
And especially for after the 7 months, because during the 7 months there were, as you said, income was provided, everything was provided, but after the 7 months, after the movie would go in premiere, what would happen? Would tourism go up or down, or what will happen? Thank you for this elaboration. Thank you for answering this question. That brings us to the end of our second clip about tourism and local communities. I think it's time to move on to the third clip that we will be watching tonight, and that is about placemaking and destination transformation. Enjoy the clip.
What made this lake really famous was Kareena Kapoor dressed as a bride riding a yellow scooter. So quite naturally, it was something everyone wanted to see, for Instagram. It was clear within the first 10 minutes that the lake was a pilgrimage every Three Idiots fan had to take. There were 3 idiot cafes, 3 idiot bums, and people dressed as Kareena Kapoor for pre-wedding shoots.
Yes, this was the third clip that we just watched. Apurva, can you please introduce yourself and elaborate on the clip we just saw?
Certainly, Fem. Thank you. My name is Apurva Nanjangood, and I'm a PhD researcher in the Worlds of Imagination team. My research looks at a part of the larger Indian film industry called, popular Hindi cinema, also commonly known as Bollywood cinema, and I look at how it has resulted in this, multifaceted kind of a transnational tourism flows because people move, they've been traveling in the direction that cinema leads in, especially with the more, contemporary Bollywood cinema, which has been quite instrumental in, and also with the growing middle class in India and growing purchasing power with, and chasing these travel experiences, basically. So my research looks at all of these different notions of, transnational tourism, but underpinning different media formats within, Bollywood cinema, like be it the film or filmy song or even a theme park for that matter. And all of this together forms a basis for my PhD as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction and elaboration. Now, as you may know, I have a question. How do destinations and destination values transform in the wake of film tourism boom?
Yeah, I think, I believe that this is a very important topic and worth discussing, also for the reason that it kind of brings in the responsibility on the tourist as well to kind of rethink, what are the consequences of our own actions for that matter. And as was kind of clearly evident from this shorter clip, which is a part of a longer documentary, I actually invite the viewers to watch the complete documentary because it kind of has a critical perspective on what are the, consequences of our actions, right? So this, just to give you a little context, this was based out of this area in, close to the, Himalayas called Ladakh, which saw 194% hike of domestic tourism after the release of this film in 2009. And since then, there have been some massive transformations in the area. Also, the most telling example is the fact that, an agro-based economy or the economy was based on, agriculture or defense, for example, is now shifted to a major tourism economy all within a span of 10 years. And that is actually quite telling of how cinema impacts certain destinations and this expedition of where the money comes from. It's quite interesting to know how this, changed in such a quick time, and with film being such a quick, mode to do that. And if one had planned to do this through, different, governmental initiatives, probably it wouldn't be this fast, is what I would like to argue, in fact. So this is one, textural change, right? Like how different cafes, sprung up in the region and these different thematic, cafes which are named after these films that actually kind of literally change the texture of the destination, because you can see, it's not just a lake that was, the serene location anymore, but it has these different makeshift spaces that have been created to kind of make it more relatable to the audiences who travel there in search of these experiences, right? That is one example, but these destination values even change because what am I associating the place with, the narrative of the film, and not so much about what the place was, originally.
Yeah.
And another interesting example was from one of my own personal travels, right, to one of the Swiss Alps, and I saw a lot of influence of Hindi language. So this in Switzerland, in a very remote location. So when I read this Hindi signboard against, snow-capped mountains, at one point you're wondering, where am I really? And that itself, questioning yourself about where you really are, also makes it, a question of this, changing transformative nature of cinema towards the location. Because being in Switzerland, I'm still questioning myself, where am I? Am I in India or am I, it's that moment where you realize cinema has such a long-lasting impact on you as a visitor, but also on, generally the location itself.
The environment itself. Thank you for
Yeah.
that answer. I have another question. Feel free to answer that. What about the financial growth of a specific area due to media tourism? Because some areas might be, well, I would not say, I don't like the usage of the word poor, but yeah, poor in this case. But due to media tourism, that environment that can grow or that can develop, what are your thoughts about that media tourism does that? Anybody may answer?
I may.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so I think there are different experiences, right? I think each location has its own dynamic. But speaking from the experiences that I, let's say, saw on my field work, it usually, what happens is that there can be economic growth or economic contribution to the location, especially in the duration of time in which, for instance, a film is being filmed in that place. As I said, there was a city in which there were 7 months of complete closure for that. So that, of course, gave that city a lot of economic contribution. There are cases as well in which locals that get involved in a production end up inspired or have the opportunity to start their own business. So two locals that I interviewed in Paraisópolis, which is a favela in São Paulo, they actually created their own production company after working as consultants for a telenovela, a soap opera Brazilian TV series. It's not really translatable this way, but so there are small gains, let's say, but I find, in my research at least, it's difficult to have this more over this broader economical gain for everybody.
Area.
Yeah, that's difficult to claim.
Thank you, Deborah, for that answer. So what we just learned is that if somebody has an entrepreneurial mind, they can move into their own company, learn from the producers that come in that area, learn and implement it in their own company. However, that is not what usually happens. Thank you for this clip and all this information. We're moving on to the final clip about media tourism and heritage. Enjoy. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, Rosa couldn't be here, so there's no opportunity for me to ask her to elaborate about this clip. However, I do have some questions that I will ask the other Q&A panel members. So the first question that I have is, how is film tourism becoming a part of wider tourism practices? Anybody can answer.
Say a few things, maybe also on behalf of Rosa. I'll try my best.
Thank you, Henry.
I think, so the clip we just saw is a clip made by Visit Scotland, which is Scotland's national tourism organization. And the clip itself already says a little bit about how media tourism is kind of becoming a more mainstream kind of traveling from maybe a kind of a thing that is a bit of a niche only for the diehard fans to something that actually maybe every one of us is also doing a little bit or thinking about a little bit. And so the tourism organizations are aware of it, and I think in Scotland's case is also interesting that Rosa herself talked to the manager of film and creative industries, who also told us about how films is a good way when people see an unfamiliar place for the first time and then also get excited to it and, like Apoorva said, get certain emotional or narrative associations with it already. So I think the fact that the tourism organization has a manager that focuses on film, that's a nice way of telling us that, okay, media tourism is becoming mainstream. In my own research, I also looked at guidebooks and travel magazines about South Korea, and also how they use certain television series as well as films to introduce certain places. And you can also see how the kind of this badge of honor of, oh, this place is as seen on TV or as seen in a movie, that also automatically already gives some value or prestige to a certain location. And that's also an interesting way of seeing how kind of the more mainstream kind of travel media, like guidebooks, like travel magazines, also are latching onto the concept of media tourism.
Thank you for that answer, Henry. I have a question for you, Stijn, just a random one. Do you know how areas are treated by filmmakers and film tourists? And what is your opinion about that? Can it be better or, worse? Hopefully not, but how can it be better?
It really depends actually a lot. For example, in England you have British film production companies, and they also tend to represent Britain in quite a positive way, which leads in the end to some kind of Anglo love for England, so to speak. So you see that a lot of tourism is also incited by media productions, but we also see a couple of examples in which the country that's being represented is actually not the one producing the movie, and then sometimes you see these more negative kind of stereotypes popping up, in which countries are, for example, from a very exotic perspective. You see that happening a lot in the research done by Emile in the Caribbean. But another example would be Romania, a country in Eastern Europe, which is represented and associated a lot with Dracula movies. And that is, of course, also a very rather negative, outdated way of looking at Romania, which also, well, is not totally liked by most Romanians, actually. Well, they like the tourists coming in, but they dislike this negative association. Yeah. And that maybe also ties in a little bit with the question that you posed before concerning the economic impact of media tourism, because in some cases you can't really measure the short-term impact, but there is something else going on, namely media tourism and popular culture in general has the power to sort of change the way how people view a certain country in general. We saw that happening with Lord of the Rings and how it affected the way that people looked at New Zealand. And it became like the most purest, beautiful country in the world because of this trilogy.
Yes.
And nowadays another example would be of Game of Thrones and how it has really changed the way that people look at Northern Ireland. Because a couple of years ago, thinking about Northern Ireland, people would associate it with the Troubles. The conflict between the Protestant and the Catholics, and nowadays more and more there's this association with this beautiful Celtic myth of parts of the kingdom of the Game of Thrones.
Yes, so it has its advantages, luckily more than the negative side.
And sometimes on an economic level, and a short term, but sometimes also on a more identity level. I think that's also what Apoorva was referring to. It's about your own identity and whether you relate to a certain country or not, but that also happens on a cultural level, so to speak. It's about the myth of a country in the way how we sort of vision a country to be.
Thank you for the answer, Stijn. Of course, of course.
Yeah, that reminds me of also the fact that there are these, increasingly there are these practices of filming like a mock location, but filming in different countries, right? Which kind of, there are a lot of films which are shot in India, but shot, say, in, Azerbaijan or somewhere where, these permissions are easier to seek, or there is more on-ground support for that matter, or, so it's creating that sense of, India, but outside of India, or why, even in Iceland, for example, I spoke with the Icelandic commissioner on my field trip and film commissioner, and he also mentioned that sometimes we don't really play Iceland in the movie. We are, like a outer space, or, like a different era for that matter, or, planet Mars for that matter. So it's also that what are you representing, or are you just providing that canvas for the story to just lend its own character to the place? Or, so like it's kind of, it can go many ways, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you all for elaborating and answering the questions I just asked. Thank you for the clips that we were able to watch. We will round up the Q&A with a general question that I will ask. I will first address it to you, and after that, I will address it to the Q&A members. It's about policymaking and scope for media tourism. What are the crucial factors for turning media tourism into a positive phenomenon for local communities? So, did you get the question, or should I? Yes? Okay. Who would like to answer this question?
I can start, but I actually have kind of a wrong answer to this question because it has very little to do with policymakers. And it has more to do about this identity, because I think popular culture doesn't only shape the identity of the place, it also shapes the identity of the people who are really committed to this culture. So you have these fans, for example, for my study of the K-drama, of the Korean drama, they also become very keen to learn more about the culture, to learn the language, and through watching the dramas and also like going to classes and the traveling, they learn a lot about that country. And when you have a lot more knowledge about the place that you're visiting, then the conflicts and frictions that you have with the local people are also a lot less. And you also see some kind of policing that might happen within the fan community where fans criticize each other for not doing good enough and for bothering the locals and for being bad tourists. So I think actually popular culture in a way also, again, going back to the education point, also serves this function of making tourists into someone who's already more prepared for the place that they are going to visit.
Thank you for this wrong answer. I saw a lot of nodding heads, so I don't know how wrong that answer was. Emil, do you have something to address on this issue?
Yeah, I think I have something to add, and it ties into what Henry also mentioned, because I think each case is different, and I think that has also been shown in all the answers that you have been provided. But I think it's always very interesting and very important to look at what kind of contestations of identity and of heritage is taking place at a particular place. So it also happens a lot that kind of the historical heritage of a place is being rewritten or overwritten by the popular heritage of the film or the television series. And there you have this contestation, and it's often that governments and film commissioners are jumping on that because it brings in a lot of tourists who are spending a lot of money, but what does it do with the place? What does it do with the identity of the place? What does it do with the populations that live there? So I think that's always a very urgent dynamic to take into consideration at each particular place. What kind of heritage are we dealing with? What are the dynamics between them, and how should we deal with them and respect them both, but also very much look at the heritage that was already in place before all of a sudden this movie or television series kind of rewrote the script of that place and of that community.
So to respect that heritage.
Yeah.
Basically, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Emil. Does anybody else wants to add something from the Q&A panel before we round off this part of the opening evening?
Yeah, maybe just it's a bit of a basic answer. There was a wrong answer, now a basic answer. And I think it has to do with also trying to collaborate with the locals. In my experience in these places that I visited in Brazil, there is a wish of residents of these locations to be more involved in these filming practices. And this can happen, for instance, not only by being hired as an extra in a film, which often happens, but that's very, specific to that time period of the filming, but also being hired to work as a consultant to help the production do research about that location. So these are forms of collaborating and kind of sensing what that community wants and needs, and then trying to, understand. And that, of course, also for the tourism industry, try to do it in conversation with the residents of that location, if possible.
Thank you. That's a nice twist. Yes, thank you. That's really interesting. Well, I would like to thank all the Q&A panel members. I'll start in this side. Emil, thank you. Let's try the clapping thing again that we just practiced. Thank you, Emil. Thank you, Apoorva. Thank you, Henry. Deborah, and Stijn. We will now go on and to watching a movie about this conference, about the worlds of imagination, because this is only the opening evening. There's a lot more planned with a lot more information and many more speakers, keynote speakers that Stijn mentioned. So let's just take a look at this clip. Thank you. Slide staat er al. Thank you, Emil. You're already here.
I am already
so you don't need an introduction. Take the stage. No, let me just say a couple of words on your behalf before you begin. Unfortunately, everything that's great needs to also come to an end as this opening evening. So the end is almost upon us, but not before we go into watching the documentary Welcome to the Smiling Coast. Emil Martens, who is standing right next to me. I was looking if you're inside the screen or outside. Yeah, you're just inside the screen, yes. He will give you more information about this documentary. But first, I want to tell a little bit more about Emil himself. He's the producer of the film. He's the story editor of the film. But other than that, Emil is an assistant professor, a postdoc researcher, the founding director of Caribbean Creativity, the co-director of Expertise Center of Humanitarian Communication, and the co-owner of the film production agency Dudes in Your Face. And in Dutch we would say, gasten in je gezicht. And that is also the company with which he made this following documentary that we're gonna see tonight, Welcome to the Smiling Coast. So without any further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Emil Martens.
Well, Fem, thanks for this elaborate introduction. And good evening to you all, or good morning, or good afternoon, depending on the time zone in which you are currently based. And once again, welcome to the opening night of the Worlds of Imagination conference, which, as you have heard by now, marks the completion of the almost 5-year ERC research project on media tourism in non-Western context. And within this project, as has also already been mentioned, I've been involved as a postdoc researcher, looking in my particular sub-project at the connections between media and tourism in the context of the Caribbean islands of Jamaica. And over the years, my research has been increasingly directed towards policy discourse and practice of the audiovisual industries. And this has been partly due to the near absence of media tourism in Jamaica when considering the narrow definition of media tourism as special interest or niche tourism, that is the tourist activity by the viewing of a moving image encompassing film, television, and new media, and largely focusing on visiting film locations, film sets, film studios, and film parks. And although film locations, and particularly Hollywood film locations, definitely play a role and are actually inscribed in Jamaica's tourism landscape, as evidenced, for example, by James Bond Beach or by the Cool Runnings Adventure Park, during the research project, I largely shifted the focus to film production, or rather film location production, thereby considering international filming, location filming as a form of business tourism, a perspective that was also already mentioned by Deborah. So put simply, an international film producer bringing in cast and crew to a country, a region, or a city, and making use of, after for months on end, as we have also just heard, of the tourist infrastructure, is a long-stay business tourist. Just think of the hotels, the restaurants, the transportations, the entertainment establishments utilized during these so-called runaway productions. So this idea, as we have also seen in Saskia's speech in the context of Rotterdam, is increasingly being promoted, is increasingly being managed by national, regional, and municipal governments with the aim, or at least the hope, of contributing to a place's economy, to a place's employment, and to a place's reputation. And film commissions were introduced in the 1940s in the United States, but by now there are over 600 government-sanctioned film commissions active worldwide. They all have different shapes, they all have different sizes, but all with the purpose of aiding film production, film and media production, and there's film tourism or business tourism in a particular place. And there's also heavily competing with each other to attract international film production. And this perspective on film tourism as business tourism, is also very much represented on this conference. Apart from having the Rotterdam Film Commission here tonight, I'm also very happy and I'm also very excited that we have a special panel tomorrow at 2 Central European Time with not less than 6 film commissioners coming from all over the world. From Spain, from Sao Paulo, from Jordan, from Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Spain and Edinburgh. And the Costa Rican and the Dominican film commissioners are also part of the study that I'm currently conducting. After having studied Jamaica's film location history and its connections with the island's tourism and colonial histories in the early 20th century, and after having examined the history of film location policy in Jamaica from the late 1940s until the late 2010s, I'm currently working on a comparative analysis of various Caribbean film commissioners, looking at their internal workings and also their external competition. That is, their competitive advantages and their competitive disadvantages compared to their Caribbean and other counterparts. So coming from the field of post-colonial media and also post-colonial film and tourism studies, and probably without her knowing, being indebted to Mimi Scheller, one of our keynote speakers on Friday. In the past 5 years, I've sought ways to contribute to a more historical and also to a more critical understanding of media tourism, one that explores the moving image and tourism in a broader temporal and broader thematic sense, and one that addresses media tourism and media and tourism in the context of the critical issues that face the world today. And this has also been the aim of Welcome to the Smiling Coast, the film that you're about to watch right after this event, or actually as part of this event. And as mentioned by Fem, apart from being a lecturer and a researcher in media and tourism studies, I'm involved in various other often related activities and initiatives, including several film productions taking place and being filmed in the Gambia and West Africa. And although quite far from the Caribbean, the Gambia is often called Little Jamaica because of its appropriation of reggae and Rastafari. And at the same time, though normally receiving quite less visitors than Jamaica, the similarly small nation of the Gambia is also heavily dependent on beach tourism. In the early 2000s, Bas Akkerman, who is a filmmaker from The Hague, not far here from Rotterdam, together with some like-minded people, set up a media training center in the Gambia, which they called State of Mike. And eventually, this training center became one of the leading media production companies in the Gambia. And Bas teamed up with Alaji and Babakar Manka, 2 brothers who are now heading State of Mike, to make a series of social issue films from a post-colonial perspective. And Welcome to the Smiling Coast was the first production in this series. And I became part of the team of Welcome to the Smiling Coast a little bit later, stepped in as a producer, stepped in as a story editor in the early 2010s. And together we made our first feature-length documentary, one that focused on the Gambian tourism industry. Because that is what connected all the characters that were interviewed with each other. In one way or another, they were involved in tourism, even though often in the margins or around the corners. And while the Gambia is probably best known for its sex tourism, its female sex tourism, we decided to follow the lives of a variety of Gambian youngsters working in the tourism industry, from security guards, property managers, and taxi drivers, to beach vendors, media producers, and musicians performing for tourists. And admittedly, we also included some insights into the sex tourism circuit. And the power of media and the power of the imagination also became evident from the interviews that we did. Apart from including interviews with several Gambian media producers, throughout the film you see how media transmitted narratives and media transmitted images often shape the ideas of people. The ideas they have about themselves, the ideas they have about others, the ideas of staying at one place or moving to another place. While the film is about tourism, it's arguably as much about migration. In almost all the interviews with Gambian tourism workers, the question of should I stay or should I go came up. Should I stay and keep working in the margins of the tourism industry, or should I take the back way, the irregular route across deserts and the Mediterranean Sea to Europe? Tourism and migration, two very different modalities, but also very much connected mobilities. And this became the part of the last section of the film. So Welcome of the Smiling Coast received its world premiere in 2016 at the Pan-African Film Festival, Los Angeles, and has since been shown at over 60 film festivals and other events, often in community or educational settings. And I'm very honored that the film, 5 years after its original release, is being screened here tonight at the opening of our Worlds of Imagination conference. And admittedly, the film is already this 5-year-old, so some things might be a little bit dated, particularly since Adama Barrow became the democratically elected president of the Gambia in 2016, 2017, so more or less a year after we released the film. And he was succeeding Jammeh, who was in power for over 20 years, exercising quite an oppressive regime. However, on the other hand, many things have also remained the same. Something that we also observed while doing research for our next film, the short narrative Gifts from Babylon, which was shot in the Gambia again in 2017 and released at the Netherlands Film Festival in 2018. And in this film we took up the topic that we ended Welcome to the Smiling Coast with and focused on the psychological impacts of irregular Africa-EU migration through the lens of a Gambian returned migrant. And I can say much more about both films, but it's time to close the night. If you, after having watched the film, have any questions about Welcome to the Smiling Coast, or in case you would like to see Gifts from Babylon, the sequel, please feel free to contact me anytime during or after the conference. And I hope that you find the film screening, which you can access right after this event, but actually for the next 3 days, so the next conference days, you can also use the promo code to access the film. I hope it's of your interest. I'm looking forward to meeting you all in the panels, but also in the lounges that we have in the AirMeet environment. And of course, I most hope to see you somewhere live in the post-corona world. Thank you.
As I said, all great things come to an end. So this is the end of the opening evening of this conference. As Emil said, the next slide, and in the comments you will see the link and the password to watch the movie, Welcome to the Smiling Coast. Enjoy the rest of the conference. My name is Audilia, also known as Fem. If you would like to have more information about me or what I do, just type in I am Femtastic on Google and you'll find me. Thank you so much. Enjoy the conference and have a great evening. See you next time.